In this video we're going to put light and shade into a floor plan. Now you've two options here. You can either try and figure out where all the light sources are coming from and apply them in the plan, or what the majority of designers do is they decide that the light is coming in at a 45-degree angle and it's sunlight, full sun, because everything looks better in full sun, and maybe when the sun is low in the sky, like in the winter at about 11 o'clock in the morning. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that the sun is somewhere here, so the brightness hits the room at this angle and casts shadows on the other side of the items. So the first thing I do is mark out roughly where that would be. I mean, I've already done this to some degree in the drawing. So if this is, you know, casting a shadow at 45 degrees, this is what the shadow is going to look like. Same with the chairs. And the table. A note to remember too is that anything that stands off the ground will throw a certain amount of shadow. The shadow won't be as long, but it still exists, like say for example on this counter behind these bar stools. So I've sort of marked out where I think the shading is going to be, roughly, just to give myself an idea before I put marker to paper. Now, there's a number of colours that you can use for shading. Any of the greys, warm grey, cool grey, ice grey. You can see a couple of here, you have your blue greys. You know, it varies and it depends probably on what your overall scheme is and what sort of a feel you want to achieve. Now for the purposes of this one, I'm going to use warm grey 5. So, and literally I take the fat end of the marker and start to pull in where I've marked out the shading. Now it seems very dark, but that will in fact dry lighter. So I'm just going to leave it in there for the moment. And because although the sun will be shining but maybe directly at this, it stands off the ground, so it will throw a certain amount of shading. And I'm going to render this in at a 45-degree angle from the stool. Again, the counter itself will have a small line of shade, as will this little credenza. Now you see I'm rendering this in after I've rendered the floor. That's fine. Some designers prefer to do it the other way, hence the reason I'm doing it this way on the table and chairs, just to give you both options. I personally prefer to do it this way because I prefer to see what the finished, you know, item looks like after the shading goes in. But remember too, like, you can adjust the shading at any time, just as long as you don't start too dark. Now, there's a little line there, and now this one is going to go over the chairs because the table is casting a shadow over those chairs. You see there's a bit of a mistake there, but it doesn't really matter. I'll fix that as I go. And then maybe our plant. That'll probably have dark bits here and there. And even the rug. I'm going to change the nib of the pen here now to use the finer nib. So maybe our rug has a little bit of shading too. There goes the top here. Now, and that looks about right. That's a pretty good representation of the shading. However, I'm literally just going to go over at the edge again because often at the very edge the line of shading is darker than the longer shadows that are thrown out. That is how you put shading into a floor plan.